Organizations can take steps to anticipate threats to business assets and operations. Understanding and preparing for these challenges is the focus of risk management. Even though managers may realistically have a limited capacity to predict future events and plan ahead, it's important to consider the possibilities for losses and disruptions and develop a game plan to respond to these issues. Risk management involves the responsibility to consider physical, human, and financial factors to protect both organizational and individual interests. Risk management involves these essential issues. How big is the threat to our organization? How likely is the threat to occur? What options do we have to reduce its impact? And what is the preferred course of action to prevent a major loss? Even though risk management is often a distinct business function, there are specific and separate risks associated with employees. In the United States and other developed nations, HR departments are included in the prevention, minimization, and elimination of workplace risks. There are a variety of risk management issues linked to HR, including preventing accidents and health problems at work, protecting employees from workplace violence, and ensuring HR data security. Other issues can involve preparing for natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and global disease outbreaks. A major part of HR-based risk management in most organizations involves health, safety, and security. The terms health, safety, and security are closely related and, because they affect each other in practice, can often be considered together when policies are created. The broader and somewhat more nebulous term is health, which refers to the general state of physical, mental, or emotional well-being. A healthy person is free from illness, injury, or mental and emotional problems that impair normal human activity. Typically, safety refers to a condition in which people's physical well-being is protected. The main purpose of effective safety programs in organizations is to prevent work-related injuries and accidents. Finally, the purpose of security is the protection of employees and organizational facilities from forces that may harm them. With the growth of workplace violence and issues such as data breaches, terrorism, and sabotage, security has become a concern for both employers and employees. Education can help. Employers can educate employees on the warning signs that often lead to danger to others on the job. Workers' compensation is a type of insurance that provides defined wage benefits and medical care to employees who are injured on the job. Experience-rated premiums reflect the company's accident rate. Employers that have higher accident rates pay higher premiums. Depending on the amount of lost time and the injured worker's wage level, these laws often require payments be made to an employee for the time away from work because of an injury, to cover medical bills, and for retraining if a new job is required as a result of the incident. Most state laws also set a maximum weekly amount for determining workers' compensation benefits. Frequently, workers' compensation benefits also make up for the permanent loss of some functionality or inability to perform the previous job. Workers' compensation coverage in many states includes emotional impairment that may have resulted from physical injury, as well as on-the-job strain, stress, anxiety, and pressure. Some cases of suicide have also been determined to be job-related in some states, with payments made under workers' compensation. Organizations with operations in multiple states must pay particular attention to the specific requirements in each state as they differ widely. Workers' compensation costs have become a major issue and can represent from 2 to 10% of payroll for employers. Given these cost concerns, organizations should focus on preventing injuries and accidents. Another key to reducing these expenses are return-to-work plans. These plans monitor employees who are off work because of injuries or illnesses with the goal of having them return to do restricted duty work that's less physically demanding until they're able to perform the full range of their job duties. Workers' compensation fraud is an expensive problem. It's estimated that about 1/4 of all workers' compensation claims filed are fraudulent. False and exaggerated claims make up the bulk of fraud and cost employers billions of dollars annually. The organization's culture and reward programs should align to promote accurate record keeping related to safety and prompt treatment of injured workers. The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 was enacted to ensure that health and safety of workers would be protected. Every employer that's engaged in commerce and has one or more employees must comply with the Act. Employers in specific industries, such as railroads and mining, are covered under other health and safety acts as well. The Occupational Safety and Health Act established 3 agencies within the Department of Labor to oversee various aspects of workplace safety. First, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, known as OSHA, administers the provisions of the law, conducts workplace inspections, and works with organizations to improve worker safety. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, known as NIOSH, is a supporting body that conducts research and develops safety standards. Finally, third, the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission reviews OSHA enforcement actions and addresses disputes between OSHA and employers that are cited by OSHA inspectors. A major responsibility of OSHA is to enforce safety regulations in an effort to reduce injuries and illnesses in the workplace. Enforcement includes creating guidelines and rules, investigating, inspecting, and levying fines. Compliance officers have great discretion and authority to ensure worker safety. While national safety statistics show improvement, there's still noteworthy tragic accidents that result in significant human and financial loss. National standards developed by engineering and quality control groups are often used by OSHA to establish its own standards. OSHA rules and standards are frequently complicated and technical. While many industries, like construction and healthcare, have specific workplace requirements, all organizations must adhere to 2 key provisions. First, general duty. The Act requires that the employer has a general duty to provide safe and healthy working conditions, even in areas where OSHA standards have not been set. Employers that know or reasonably should know of unsafe or unhealthy conditions can be cited for violating the General Duty Clause. Second, notification and posters. Employers are required to inform their employees of OSHA safety and health standards. OSHA posters must also be displayed in prominent locations in workplaces. OSHA has established Process Safety Management or PSM standards that focus on hazardous chemicals. Hazard communication standards require manufacturers, importers, distributors, and users of hazardous chemicals to evaluate, classify, and label those substances using standardized symbols. Employers must make information about hazardous substances available to all employees. This information is contained in material safety data sheets known as MSDS, which must be readily accessible to those who work with chemicals and other certain dangerous substances. The MSDS indicate antibodies or actions that should be taken should someone be exposed to the substance. Workers should be trained on how to access and use MSDS information. Standards for personal protective equipment, known as PPE, require that employers analyze job hazards, provide adequate PPE to employees in hazardous jobs, and train them in the use of PPE items. Common PPE items include safety glasses, hard hats, and safety shoes. Employers are required to provide PPE to all employees at no cost who work in an environment that presents hazards or who might have contact with hazardous chemicals or substances on the job. OSHA has established a standard regarding exposure to bloodborne pathogens such as the hepatitis B virus and HIV. This regulation was developed to protect employees who are regularly exposed to blood and other such substances. OSHA standards help maintain a safe and healthy work environment for all employees. Most organizations must complete OSHA Form 300 to report workplace accidents and injuries and retain it for 5 years. The OSHA 300 log is the primary reporting document that companies must prepare and maintain related to workplace injuries. The log is not sent to OSHA unless specifically requested by the agency. Employers must keep a log for each establishment on site. Employees have the right to review these records. Each year, employers are also required to summarize the data from the log and post it in the workplace from February 1st through April 30th. Injuries to direct and indirect, temporary, contract, and other contingent workers must all be recorded. Categories of recordable injuries include, first, death, which is a fatality at the workplace or caused by work-related actions. Second, injuries, causing days away from work, which are job-related injuries or disabling occurrences that cause an employee to miss regularly scheduled work on the day following the accident. Third, injuries or illnesses causing job transfer or restricted duty, which are job-related injuries or illnesses that lead an employee working to a job outside of his or her normal assignment. And fourth and finally, other reasonable cases, injuries that require treatment by a physician but do not cause an employee to miss a regularly scheduled work shift. New reporting requirements effective in 2015 expand the list of accidents that must be reported directly to OSHA shortly after they occur. Occupational fatalities and hospitalizations of 3 or more employees must be reported directly to OSHA within 8 hours of the occurrence. In addition, injuries that result in amputation, loss of an eye, or an employee being hospitalized must be also reported to OSHA within 24 hours of their occurrence. Accurate reporting is more likely to occur in organizations with a positive safety climate and when supervisors consistently enforce safety behaviors. Managers must realize that companies can incur hefty fines in the millions of dollars for not properly disclosing incidents. Inspections may occur on the spot or as part of an investigation of a complaint or as part of targeted enforcement in high-hazard industries. In Marshall v. Barlow's, Incorporated, the U.S. Supreme Court held that safety inspectors must produce a search warrant if an employer refuses to voluntarily allow inspectors into their facility. The court also ruled that an inspector does not have to show probable cause to obtain a search warrant. A warrant can be obtained easily if a search is part of a general enforcement plan. When an OSHA compliance officer arrives, managers should ask to see the inspector's credentials. Next, the company HR representative or safety professional should insist on an initial conference with the compliance officer. During the inspection, the officer checks organizational records to see if they're being maintained and to determine the number of accidents that have occurred. Following this review of safety records, the officer conducts an on-the-spot inspection and may use a wide variety of equipment to verify compliance with standards. Many types of violations are cited by OSHA, ranging from the most severe to minimal, including a special category for repeated violations. The most common are outlined next. Although OSHA inspectors can issue citations for violations of the Act, whether a citation is issued depends on the severity and extent of the problems and on the employer's knowledge of them. In addition, depending on the nature and number of violations, monetary penalties can be assessed against employers. The nature and extent of penalties depend on the type and severity of the violations as determined by OSHA officials. When there's reasonable certainty that a condition will cause death or serious physical harm if it's not corrected immediately, an imminent danger citation is issued, and the inspector posts a notice. Imminent danger situations are handled on the highest priority basis. If the condition is serious enough and the employer does not cooperate, a representative of OSHA may obtain a federal injunction to close the worksite until the condition is corrected. The absence of guardrails to prevent employees from falling into heavy machinery is one example of an imminent danger. When a condition could probably cause death or serious physical harm, and the employer should know of the condition, OSHA issues a serious violation citation and may impose a fine of up to $7,000 per violation. Examples of serious violations are the absence of a protected screen or lath and the lack of a blade guard on an electric saw. Violations that could impact employees' health and safety but probably not cause death or serious harm are called other than serious. Violators may be fined up to $7,000 per violation. Having loose ropes in a work area might be classified as an other than serious violation. A de minimis violation is one directly or indirectly related to employees' safety or health. No citation or fines are issued, but the condition is mentioned to the employer. Lack of doors on toilet stalls is a common example of de minimis violations. Citations for willful and repeated violations are issued to employers that have been previously cited for violations. If an employer knows about a safety violation or has been warned of a violation and does not correct the problem, a second citation is issued. The penalty for a willful and repeated violation can be high, ranging from $5,000 to $70,000 per violation. Federal OSHA compliance officers conducted over 39,000 inspections and found over 70,000 violations in a recent year. The most common violations are related to fall protection, hazard communication, scaffolding, respiratory protection, and powered industrial trucks. The construction industry is cited more often than any other industry. Well-designed and effectively managed safety programs can result in reduced accidents and associated costs. Further, a variety of safety problems can decline as a result of management's efforts to emphasize a safe work environment. Companies that proactively manage safety efforts tend to perform better financially than those who do not. Often, the difference between high-performance firms with good occupational safety records and other firms is that the former have effective safety management programs. Organizations with effective safety management programs take many of the following steps to reduce accidents. At the heart of safety management is an organizational commitment to a comprehensive safety effort that should be coordinated at the top level of management and include all members of the organization. The actions of managers should also support that effort. Balancing the competing demands for safety and productivity can be difficult, especially for frontline supervisors. Executives must effectively lead efforts to establish a culture that emphasizes safety as the highest priority. Designing safety policies and rules along with disciplining violators are important components of safety efforts. Frequently reinforcing the need for safe behavior and frequently supplying feedback on positive safety practices are also effective ways of improving worker safety. Such safety-conscious efforts must involve employees, supervisors and managers, safety specialists, and HR personnel. Accidents in the workplace are often reduced with safety training that's conducted in various ways. Regular sessions with supervisors, managers, and employees can be coordinated by HR staff members. Communicating about safety procedures, reasons accidents occurred, and what to do in an emergency is critical. Without effective communication about safety, training is insufficient. To reinforce safety training, continuous communication to develop safety consciousness is necessary. Many companies hold brief monthly safety meetings conducted by frontline supervisors. Employees frequently participate in safety planning through safety committees, which are often comprised of workers from a variety of levels and departments. A safety committee generally meets at regularly scheduled times, has specific responsibilities for conducting safety reviews, identifying risks, and making recommendations for changes necessary to avoid future accidents. At least one member of the committee usually comes from the HR department. Some best practices for utilizing safety committees include the following. Leadership involvement. Senior leaders need to endorse and support safety committee efforts. Middle managers and frontline supervisors must actively assist in committee and address their concerns. Committee selection. To ensure commitment, employees who are already safety advocates should be assigned to the committee. Member terms should be staggered to provide a fresh perspective and continuous energy. Committee structure. Typically, equal representation from management and employees keeps the committee in balance. It is not necessary to wait for an OSHA inspector to check the work area for safety hazards. Regular inspections can be performed by a safety committee or by a company safety coordinator. Problem areas should be addressed immediately to prevent accidents and keep the work productivity at the highest possible levels. Also, OSHA inspects organizations with above average rates of lost workdays more frequently. Therefore, reducing accidents can lower the frequency of on-site OSHA visits. Ergonomics is the study and design of the work environment to address physical demands placed on individuals as they perform their jobs. The primary goal is to make work more human-friendly and to reduce work-related injuries, particularly repetitive motion problems. In a work setting, ergonomic studies look at factors such as fatigue, lighting, tools, equipment layout, and placement of controls. Ergonomics can provide economic value to employers by reducing injuries. Organizations should monitor and evaluate their safety efforts. Just as organizational accounting records are audited, a firm's safety efforts should be audited as well. The use of illicit substances or misuse of controlled substances, alcohol, or other drugs is called substance abuse. Employers' concerns about substance abuse stem from the ways it alters work behaviors, causing increased tardiness and absenteeism, lower productivity, a higher rate of mistakes, and more industrial accidents. It can also cause an increase in withdrawal, either physical or psychological, and an antagonistic behavior, which can lead to workplace violence. Many organizations have instituted drug screening programs that include pre-employment testing and testing after workplace accidents, along with zero-tolerance policies that address employees' use of alcohol and drugs. A company should also consider utilizing an employee assistance program known as an EAP for support and counseling related to substance abuse. EAPs assist troubled employees so that they can remain employed. HR professionals get involved in substance abuse issues by taking actions such as training supervisors to identify and help prevent problems. They also work with supervisors and managers to institute progressive discipline for substance abusers that provide them with a chance to seek assistance. HR professionals and managers should refrain from diagnosing employees, as this is a task best left to those trained in mental health and substance abuse issues. Rather, all management actions should focus on work behaviors and job performance. Many companies use alcohol and drug testing, especially following an accident or incident or for some other reasonable cause. A majority of organizations require some or all applicants to take a drug test before they're hired. Using these tests can improve employee productivity and attendance and reduce injuries and workers' compensation claim costs. Some employers also use random drug testing programs. The U.S. Department of Transportation requires drug testing for transportation workers in aviation, trucking, railroad, mass transit, pipeline, and commercial vessel operations. The U.S. Department of Labor provides extensive guidance on its website to help employers implement legal and effective drug testing programs. Key points include careful selection of a certified testing lab, proper policy and notification to applicants and employees, precise chain of custody, and conformity to testing positive result procedures. There are several types of tests to detect drug use: urinalysis, radionicity of hair, surface swiping, and fitness for duty testing. The ADA affects how management can handle substance abuse cases. Currently, users of illegal drugs are specifically excluded from the definition of a disabled person under the Act. However, those addicted to legal substances like alcohol or other prescription drugs are considered disabled under the ADA, as are recovering substance abusers. To encourage employees to seek help for their substance abuse problems, a firm choice option is usually recommended and has been endorsed legally. In this procedure, a supervisor or a manager confronts the employee privately about unsatisfactory work-related behavior. Then, in keeping with the disciplinary system, the employee is offered a choice between help and discipline. Treatment options and consequences of further unsatisfactory performance are clearly discussed, including what the employer will do. Confidentiality and follow-up are important when employers use the firm choice option. The legal use of marijuana for medical reasons has been authorized by nearly half of the states in the United States. In addition, several states have also legalized the recreational use of marijuana. This poses some dilemmas for organizations located in those states. However, even though consumption of alcohol is legal, employers are still permitted to limit its use in the workplace. Alcohol and drug use among employees and their family members can be an expensive problem for business and industry, with issues ranging from lost productivity, absenteeism, injuries, fatalities, theft, and low employee morale, to an increase in healthcare, legal liabilities, and workers' compensation costs. A comprehensive approach to security management is needed to address a wide range of possible threats to an organization's assets and workers. These threats may come from outside the organization or may be due to employee misbehavior. HR managers may be responsible for security programs or may work closely with security managers or consultants. A security audit is a comprehensive review of organizational security. Sometimes called a vulnerability analysis, such an audit uses managers inside the organization and outsiders to assess security issues and risks. Typically, a security audit begins with a survey of the area around the facility. Factors that can be evaluated include lighting, traffic flow, location of emergency response services, crime in the surrounding neighborhood, and the layout of the buildings and grounds. Another part of security audit reviews disaster plans, which address how to deal with events such as earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and fires. A key part of security involves controlling access to the organization's physical facilities. Many organizations limit access to facilities and work areas by using electronic access or keycard systems. Although not foolproof, these systems can make it difficult for an unauthorized person, such as an estranged spouse or disgruntled former employee, to enter the premises. Access controls can also be used in elevators and stairwells to prevent unauthorized people from entering designated areas within a facility. Controlling computer access is an important part of safeguarding employees' personnel data. Coordinating with information technology staff to change passwords and access codes and otherwise protect company information are important steps to secure IT resources. Threats to business data include hackers breaching computer systems, remotely installed malware, theft of laptops and mobile storage devices, and insider threats. A key facet of providing security is screening job applicants. Firms that do not screen employees adequately may be subject to liability if an employee later commits a crime. Providing adequately trained security personnel in sufficient numbers is part of security management. Many employers contract with firms specializing in security. If security is provided in-house, security personnel must be selected and trained to handle a variety of workplace security problems, ranging from dealing with an employee's violent behavior to taking charge in natural disasters. Many states require security guards to be registered and often require ongoing training to maintain that status. Employers can enhance security by conducting security audits, controlling access to workplace and computer systems, screening employees adequately during the selection process, and providing security personnel. Workplace violence consists of violent acts directed at someone who's at work or on duty. For example, physical assault, threats, harassment, intimidation, and bullying all qualify as violent behaviors at work. Workplace violence can be instigated by several categories of individuals. Criminal. A crime is committed in conjunction with the violence by a person with no legitimate relationship with the business, like a robber, an arsonist, or a trespasser. A customer, who's a person with a legitimate relationship with the business that becomes violent, like a patient, student, inmate, or customer. A coworker, who's a current or past employee that attacks or threatens another person, like a contractor or a temporary employee. Domestic, a person who has no legitimate relationship with the business but has a personal relationship with the victim who commits some form of violence against that individual, like a family member or a boyfriend. In many cases, the perpetrator of a violent act exhibits signs well before committing the act. However, these signals are often given inadequate attention or even dismissed. Fears of litigation cause some HR professionals and managers to wait for clearer evidence that an employee may act violently. Although a cautious approach may seem legally defensible, companies also have a duty to protect their workers from workplace danger. Taking threats seriously and acting proactively if an employee poses a threat are appropriate steps to take. Managers, HR staff members, supervisors, and employees should be trained on how to recognize the signs of potentially violent employees and what to do when violence occurs. During training at many organizations, participants learn the typical profile of potentially violent employees and are trained to notify the HR department and refer employees to outside counseling professionals. Such training requires observers to notice individuals' verbal and nonverbal reactions that may indicate anger or hostility and to listen to individuals who are exhibiting such a reaction. Specific suggestions addressed in training when dealing with potentially violent employees typically include the following: Ask questions requiring explanations and longer answers to allow the individual to vent. Respond calmly and non-threateningly to an individual's emotions. Acknowledge concerns and demonstrate understanding of how the individual feels. Get assistance from others, perhaps a manager not directly affected by the situation being discussed. Indicate the need for time to respond to the concerns voiced and then set up another time for follow-up. Notify security and HR personnel whenever an employee's behavior changes dramatically or when a job disciplinary action may provoke significant reactions from an employee. Dysfunctional workplace interactions can create a workplace filled with hostility and disrespect. Incivility occurs when rude behavior by ill-mannered coworkers or bosses makes the targets of incivility feel annoyed, frustrated, or even offended. Most employees do not find incivility serious enough to file a formal complaint, but incivility can escalate into bullying and lead to other destructive workplace behaviors that are likely to require action. Bullying is behavior that the victim perceives as oppressive, humiliating, threatening, or infringing on the target's human rights, and that occurs over an extended period of time. Bullying, especially by supervisors, can result in damage to the employee and to the organization, leading to increased turnover. Bullying can lead to serious physical and emotional damage to targets and can result in lost time from work and lower productivity. One consideration when it comes to workplace violence is a violence response team. Comprised of security personnel, key managers, HR staff members, and selected employees, this team functions much like a safety committee, but with a different focus. Such a team conducts analysis, responds to and investigates employee threats, and may help calm angry, volatile employees. Post-violence response is another aspect of managing workplace violence. Whether the violence results in physical injuries or death, or just intense interpersonal conflicts, it's important that employers have plans to respond afterward. Their response must reassure employees who may be fearful of returning to work or who experience anxiety, among other reactions. Providing referrals to EAP resources, allowing employees time off and time to meet with HR staff, and arranging for on-site trained counselors are all possible elements of a post-violence response effort. According to a SHRM study, the 9/11 attacks encouraged many organizations to revisit and update the plans used to prepare employees for various disasters. And while not every kind of problem can be foreseen, just having such a plan can be very beneficial for building confidence. All of the issues have led to an expanded role of HR staff in disaster planning. Crisis management has become important to prepare for any instance in which organizations and their employees are impacted by such events. Effectively managing a crisis that a company faces can be detailed in 3 basic steps. Pre-crisis. Identify how crises can be avoided through proper preparation, risk assessment, and disaster prevention. The crisis. Craft a plan that enables the firm to adequately identify and respond to a crisis. And finally, post-crisis. Identify how the organization can better respond to the same or a similar crisis if it were to happen again. Disaster planning should include consideration of organizational factors, human impact analysis, and disaster training. Organizational assessment includes establishing a disaster planning team, often comprised of representatives from HR, security, information technology, operations, and other areas. The purpose of this team is to conduct an organizational assessment of how various disasters might affect the organization and its employees. Then a disaster recovery plan is developed to identify how the organization will respond to various situations. The impact of events on people should be assessed and contingency plans put in place. Issues such as having backup databases along with employee contact information are key considerations of such planning. Identifying who will take responsibility for various duties and how these efforts will be coordinated must also be determined. Some organizations have done an effective job, such as planning. All planning efforts may be wasted if managers and employees are not trained on what to do when disasters occur. Training should take place regularly and reflect actual workplace conditions to simulate a real emergency as closely as possible. This training should cover a wide range of topics including the following: first aid and CPR, hazardous materials containment, disaster escape means, employer contact methods, and organizational restoration efforts. Disaster preparation and recovery planning have grown to be important HR concerns.